it's the beginning of the new year, so I should be doing one of those traditional things, right? I should be telling you what happened last year in politics and why it matters, or what to expect this year, etc., etc. But guess what? I'm not going to do it. I'm a little bored of talking about politics, so let's talk about something that's more immediate. Let's talk about holidays. If you've been looking at social media, if you've been talking to your friends, you'll realize that many of them have just come back from holiday. And if you haven't gone on holiday yourself, I'm sure you wanted to. So let's talk about holidaying in India, or not holidaying in India. Because if you'll hear the stories and you look at the social media posts, you will discover that a surprisingly large number of people did not holiday in India. They went abroad this year. And if you look at the people who did holiday in India, if you look at the posts about Goa, for example, all you'll get is complaints and abuse. People will tell you how bad it was, how Goa is no longer the place it used to be, how it's been a flop winter for them, and so on. Now, all of this matters because we are allegedly on target for huge growth in tourism. The government has told us that by 2047, we will get 100 million foreign tourists. It's not really that large a number because, let's say, France gets, I think, 90 million tourists a year. Italy or Spain get nearly that number. Spain, I know, gets 85 million tourists. So for a country like India, which is so vast and has so much to offer, we should get 100 million, right? No, wrong, because the truth is, to get 100 million tourists, we would have to grow in terms of tourist arrivals at something like 15% a year. But if you look at the best years for Indian tourism, which is roughly the beginning of the century till about 2019, we actually managed a growth of only 8.5%. Since then, since 2019, far from growing at 8.5%, we've actually come down. The truth is that in the last year, we had fewer tourists than we did in 2019. That's odd, isn't it? Because tourism is booming all over the world. But the reality is, we've never really been a successful tourist destination. Even in 2019, when we bragged about getting 10 million tourists or whatever, Dubai got 16.5. And Dubai getting 16.5 million tourists when it's one city, and India getting 10 point something, tells you something about the disparity. And that disparity has grown. Over the last year, Dubai got, I think, 11% more tourists than it did in 2019. We got much less. So yes, there is a problem with Indian tourism. People don't want to come. Why don't they want to come? Well, I've been reading the foreign press. The Economist, for example, has done an excellent article on our tourism problems. And there are many reasons: the red tape, the trouble at airports, pollution, crime, the perception that women are not safe, the lack of an infrastructure, high costs. You can go on and on. So, will we ever grow and reach that figure? I don't think we will. I mean, it's great for the government to have these huge targets, but the truth is that tourism in India, particularly over the last 3 or 4 years, has been a bit of a disaster, and it's not going to get better. Now, there is a traditional response to this, and we saw it recently. The Chief Minister of Goa held a press conference, and he said, so what if foreign tourists are not coming? Domestic arrivals have gone up. And that's been pretty much the claim Indian tourist officials have always made, that even if we don't get foreign tourists, Indians travel so much that it doesn't matter. The domestic tourism strategy makes a certain amount of sense. The Indian middle class now has money, people travel, so why do we need so many foreigners? If you look at the countries with really great numbers of tourist arrivals, like, say, Spain, Italy, France, many of the tourists who come are from the European Union. And because there is free access within the European Union, it's almost an extension of domestic tourism. So why can't we do that? Or to give you a more pertinent example, look at America. If you tried to apply for an American tourist visa, if you've ever had to wait 4 hours in the immigration queue at JFK, you will say to yourself, don't these guys want tourists? Answer, no, they don't. If you look at journeys in America, something like, I forget the exact figure, but nearly 70% or over two-thirds are done by Americans within America. Tourism in America is a domestic affair. They don't really want foreign tourists. There are enough Americans who travel to fill up the casinos of Las Vegas, to fill up the hotels of New York City, New Orleans, the Grand Canyon, Niagara Falls, anywhere. Whatever they get in terms of foreign tourists is the cherry on the cake, the icing. It's domestic tourism that keeps America going. Now, it's been suggested that domestic tourism is a good strategy for India because, as we will have seen over the last decade or so, if there's a terror threat, if there's a bomb blast, a health scare, then foreign tourists cancel. Now, the argument is that domestic tourists won't cancel. It's a much more stable source of tourism revenue. I have no problem with that. It makes a certain amount of sense. But here's the problem. Even domestic tourists are not traveling within India. Even they are not holidaying in India. They're all going abroad. So if even domestic tourists are going abroad, you have to look at our tourism and say, what's the problem? Well, the problem is simple. Many of the things that foreigners feel, we feel too. If you've been looking at social media, you will have seen the uproar about Goa. And I used to go to Goa a lot at one stage. And I thought it was an important destination because if you were to go to, say, Jaipur, you were to go to Agra to see the Taj, you'd go what? Once, twice. But it's not the sort of thing you'd go back again and again to, right? Goa, on the other hand, you can go every year. I used to go to Goa every year for Christmas or New Year. I used to visit about 3 times a year. It really was a lovely destination. I don't go any longer. For the last 2 years, I've tried to find reasons not to go to Goa. If I'm invited to conferences, I make excuses because Goa has really collapsed. It's a lot of criminality mixed up with politics, with corrupt police officials, with corrupt bureaucrats. There's a taxi mafia. I'll give you an example, if you live in a hotel and you get a taxi from outside and the local taxi mafia are not making any money out of you, they will beat up the taxi driver. That's how bad it is. The infrastructure has collapsed and it's much dirtier and more expensive than many other destinations, certainly much worse than it used to be. As Goa and other Indian destinations have declined, foreign destinations have become more attractive. Look at Southeast Asia. Bangkok is much better than Goa from the point of view of economics. At the bottom end of the market or the lower end of the market, Bangkok hotels are cheaper than Goa hotels. Fares are competitive. At the top end of the market, the luxury end, so-called, Goa is a disaster. There are very few really good hotels. There are just a lot of expensive so-called 5-star hotels. If you look at fares, if you're going to go in high season, then the airfare from Delhi to Goa is actually more than the airfare from Delhi to Bangkok in business class. So there's something wrong, surely. Why would you expect people to go to Goa when they can go abroad and get a better deal? It's got worse because Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam, all of those places have opened up. And they're even cheaper than Thailand. I first went to Vietnam about 20 years ago and I thought it was a great undiscovered destination. Well, everyone has discovered it now. It's actively attracting tourists from India. People are going, they're paying much less, and they're having a fantastic time. Why would they go and get their taxi drivers beaten up in Goa when they can do this? And it's not just the Far East. If you told me 5 years ago that Indians would go to Uzbekistan or Kazakhstan, to Almaty, to Tashkent, I'd laugh in your face. But that's where they're going. That's where the great boom is. These destinations, which sound exotic, are only about 3 hours from Delhi. The airfares are cheaper than domestic airfares. Once you get there, the hotels are cheaper, food is cheaper, they're more interesting places. So again, between Central Asia and Southeast Asia, both of which are really not far from India. The bottom is falling out of the Indian tourism market. We used to say that at least when you travel in India, you don't have to apply for a visa, it's easy. Well, guess what? Many of these countries no longer require visas for India. And the ones that do, you can get them online, there's no problem, or you can get them on arrival. So, given that competition between exotic destinations, which are cheaper, more interesting, and our own destinations, which are in desperate decline, what do you think people are going to choose? Of course, they're going to choose the foreign destinations. Given this sort of crisis, how do you suppose Indian tourism is reacting? Well, I mentioned the Goa Chief Minister's press conference earlier, and that's about on par with everything the Goan government has said so far. It has suggested there's a conspiracy to do down Goa, that influencers are being used to attack Goa. It's not been said who's paying for it, China or somebody, they'll probably claim. But these kind of conspiracy theories are all our politicians can come up with. They won't face up to the mess they've made of tourism. They'll just blame the other party. You can blame all you want, but if you run a crap destination, people won't come. That's the truth, isn't it? So what do? Tourism does matter, don't kid yourself. Wherever there is a tourist boom, the local people always prosper. In places like Thailand, Vietnam, which we are talking about, tourism has improved standards of living. In places like Thailand, Vietnam, even Central Asia, tourism has improved standards of living. The people who benefit from tourism are the ordinary people in that area. They have much, much better lives now because of tourism. We're not going to get that. We're certainly not going to get that from foreigners. And whatever we could have got from our own people, we're losing. If you look at tourism's contribution to GDP, which in most countries is going up, in India, it's actually going down. Can we do anything about it? Well, as an Indian, I feel bad. I write about travel. I want India to prosper. I want more people to come to India. I'm proud of India. But it's not up to me. It's not up to you either. It's up to our politicians. It's up to them to do something about the high taxation levels which lead to these high costs, about the lack of infrastructure, about the law and order situation. And they won't do it. They won't do anything. I don't know why that is, but I'll have one tip for you. The next time you take a flight to the West, particularly in summer, look and see if there's a politician on board. The chances are you'll find one. And if you go to London in June, July, you will find more Indian politicians there than you will find in Parliament sometimes. Because Indian politicians like the West, they have the money, they go and they have fun. As for India, Indian tourist destinations, as far as they're concerned, well, that's just too bad.